Alrighty, good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's weather chat. I'm meteorologist Timmy Albertson here with you guys. Probably kind of another quick one is we're not necessarily seeing a whole lot in the way of active weather across the country. Now, of course, as mentioned, even on the quietest days, the weather can still be pretty active. But in terms of thunderstorm activity or snow activity, we're not really seeing too much, at least this evening, across parts of the U.S. But that might change later on as we go into the next couple of days. But as mentioned, though, one of the big things that we've been seeing that's been very noticeable about this winter is the weather across the upper part of the Midwest. Now, mind you, for about a week in January, we had a pretty straight winter, but other than that, it's been almost like perpetual November up here, and that has resulted in us not really getting much snow. As a matter of fact, most of the time our systems that have been coming through, especially during the month of December, it was always just a couple degrees too warm, and it ended up almost always being rain. That creates not the best situation when you're wanting a really cold winter, as typically you would want a good amount of snow on the ground because that kind of reflects the sun's energy from basically it's getting absorbed into the ground. The air is a terrible conductor of heat. It is the ground that does all that. But if there's snow on it, doesn't really have the ability to absorb much. And so, long story short, it kind of continues to stay pretty cold. That's why we see places like Siberia get very, very cold. Believe it or not, they actually don't get that much snow in Siberia, but the snow that they do get, and then of course the sun angle being so low, and a lot of other things that kind of go into effect there. But long story short, a little bit of snow, just enough. It stays there pretty much through about 5 or 6 months of the year, and it allows for what is known as the Siberian high pressure to develop. Now, typically, we don't have anything called like a upper Midwest high pressure, but some of the same properties are in effect. Again, you would want a good amount of snow on the ground, and then that will really just kind of help to keep things pretty cold through the winter. That has not necessarily been the case. As a matter of fact, it's just been kind of barren out across parts of the upper part of the Midwest. And well, that has resulted in some of that heat getting absorbed by the ground, and our temperatures, while maybe not approaching daily record highs, certainly are not dropping much during the nighttime hours. And long story short, it puts us at a very big disadvantage for a multitude of reasons. Some places like International Falls still getting at least a little bit of snow, but if you live up around this area, it's a little weird not seeing all this. There's snowmobile trails everywhere, but you wouldn't know that because there's no snow. So thus there are no snowmobiles, and therefore the snowmobile trails are not very evident because they look like dirt bike trails, which is what they are actually in the summertime. Anyways, let's take a look at some numbers here, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the forecast here. Now, as mentioned, we talked a little bit about International Falls, so why not jump right to it, kind of give you guys a little bit of an idea of what we're talking about here. So, this is, of course, from the National Weather Service. Not the prettiest graphic out here, but if you're like me and you enjoy numbers, well, this is certainly enough for you. Hopefully, that you are able to see it here pretty decently. But this is so far for the month of February up at the International Falls where they take the measurements up around that area. Again, for those of you who don't know where this is, it's right on the Canadian border in northern Minnesota. Frequently one of the coldest spots in the country, at least in the lower 48 during the winter time. We say lower 48 because obviously several places in Alaska will certainly beat this out. But for the most part, let's just take a look here at International Falls. So, what you might be noticing, if you live in the deep south, this looks like winter for you. If you are from this area, though, or you live up in this area, I'm natively from Ohio, but up here, uh, this is not necessarily what you would consider winter. This is more or less like what we would see in the month of November or even early December. Take a look here. High temperatures, especially for the first about 2 weeks of the month of February so far, high temperatures have almost consistently been in the at least upper 30s, especially for the first week here of February. Take a look. High temperature 38. Next day was 36, 38 again, 32, 38, 36. And then look at that on the 7th and the 8th, they got into the lower 40s for a high temperature. That's a little weird. What's interesting is there was at least some snow on the ground when this happened, which, given the way the setup was about 2 weeks ago, probably prevented them from getting temperatures even higher up. As a matter of fact, this place had actually, I believe, hit about 53 degrees on the 31st. So, anyways, a little bit of snow on the ground at least kind of helped out from keeping their temperatures from going quite as hot during the afternoon. Nonetheless, though, still pretty above average. But the one thing I want you to keep an eye on here too is look at these low temperatures. Now, again, if you're from an area pretty much anywhere south of I-70, this is winter for you. I mean, this doesn't look that unusual. But for those of you who live north of I-94, this is a little bit of a different story. So take a look at these lows here on some of these nights. 25-degree low on February 6th. The next day, the low was 32. And the following day, the low temperature was only 36 degrees. That's really weird. In fact, in climatology, sometimes a lot what we like to do is given the fact that sometimes you can have a system come through in a day and it could jack up the temperature to, unusually high, but then if the cooler air mass comes in behind it, it could push that temperature right back down. So sometimes it's a little weird just looking at highs and just looking at lows from a climatological standpoint. So at least, when we're comparing things, one of the big things that we like to do is average those two temperatures. We average the high and the low together in one day, and we call that the daily, or we call that, the mean temperature of the day. As a matter of fact, a lot of times when if you're going monthly data, you'll see the mean temperature of the month. So that's including all the highs and all the lows together. Again, it kind of, helps to eliminate maybe some of those weird situations where you could have a nighttime frontal passage or something along those lines. Anyways, it kind of works out nicely. Usually, not always, but usually. All right, so that being said, you got the average high temperature and the average, or you have the observed high and the observed low, smash them together, that gives you the daily mean temperature for that area. Now, it might be a little hard for you to see, especially if you're watching this on your phone, but take a look at that. 39 degrees above average is what the 8th of February was. 39 degrees average, basically 40 degrees above average. That's really weird. That's very unusual. In fact, that is really unusual. And not only that, well, that in its own right is impressive. What's even more impressive about it is the how let me try this again. How above average it was leading up to that. The day before it was 37 degrees above average. The day before that, 31. And then we had 2 days in a row where it was 30 degrees above average, and then 29 degrees above average on the first. So I mean, not only was that one particular day very above average, which in its own right is certainly impressive, but maybe not as uncommon as you think, especially during winter time, especially, if you get some of these strong systems, though typically once you're pushing about 40 degrees above average, it is a little unusual regardless of the setup. But that being said, not only was this not just one event, but this has been the case throughout much of the winter. In fact, we'll take a look at some of the other months here. But it has been consistently double-digit numbers above average. And again, one of the big culprits of that is a lack of snow, which, again, around here, that creates a very important feedback loop in terms of the air temperatures. And again, if you really want to take it to the extreme, look at how Siberia is. Can you imagine if there was no snow in Siberia? Yes, it would still be chilly, but probably not quite as cold. Again, they don't get that much in Siberia. They get a little bit, but then it sticks on the ground and, it's there for the whole winter. Typically, that's kind of the case up around this area. Now, that being said, there's some lake effect enhancement that goes on depending upon what part of the Northland you're in. But overall, yes, they get snowfall, and yes, they'll get a bit more than most places in the country. But that being said, it's, you get a little bit of it, and normally it just kind of sets up from there where, just that colder air just keeps building and building and building. So every system that comes through doesn't have, yeah. All right. So you get the idea. What has been interesting about this is that as we get closer to average, it feels like a big cool down. As a matter of fact, there was no days so far in International Falls this month, at least so far in the month of February, that has been below average. The closest it got was 3 degrees above average. All right, high temperature was 8 degrees. The low was -2. That was back on the 16th. They also had a little bit of snow on that day. That's what's also been very impressive about this. Now, if we back up to the month of January, though, we did see a little bit of a deviation from that. Now, we started off January, much like we did December, with very above average temperatures. All right. And then we had our 2 weeks of winter come through. Again, remember we were talking about, those cold temperatures in the deep south, all of that, same thing, those two strong lows that tracked across the Ohio River Valley, all of that. Take a look. It then took those, it really did change. Like I said, in fact, we actually went below average for a little bit in the month of January, but not as below average as we had been above average, if that makes any sense. But it was still enough, 4 degrees below average, down to 11 degrees below average. Then we just kind of hung around that range for, the remainder of that week. And then take a look, boom, right back into these 30 degree, 42 degrees above average on the 31st. High temperature there of 53 degrees. So, whew, yeah, that's been the trend. And International Falls is just one of many locations across this area that has generally been seeing that same thing. So, even though those temperatures might look cold, again, they were below average. But the big thing here, the big problem that we've had all winter is that it doesn't stick around. And when it does, it kind of helps to put us right back to where we should be, or at least kind of helps to even things out, but then it quickly goes away. So, how above average was the month of January in International Falls? 9 degrees above average. That's pretty warm. I mean, 9 degrees above or even below is a significant deviance. Let's take a look at December. December, it was almost 16 degrees above average. Again, you can see same thing. There's all these consistent days of double digit, if not even nearing 30 to 35 degrees above average, including yet again another 40-degree above average day on top of plenty of 20s. So that was a month where it was about 15.8 degrees above average. How are we doing for the month of February? Not much better. Actually, it's a little bit worse. 15.9 degrees above average right now. So, is there going to be the possibility that we could maybe see these temperatures trying to drop a little bit? The answer is yes. But in an area like this, snowfall also really makes a kind of a big difference. Could we maybe be seeing some snow? Maybe a little bit. But yeah. So the thing is that every time we've had a little bit of a cool down, it just so happens that there hasn't been that much snow around. And when there has been, well, it does make a little bit of a difference. So let's take a look here, of course, at the latest weather map and see what in the world is going on. Now that you know everything there is to know about the past couple of months of International Falls and pressure friends with that at a party, let's take a look here at the latest weather map. Once again, we have ourselves a setup where we don't necessarily have a predominant system going on. Now, there is that area of high pressure off New England, but overall, kind of quiet. A little bit of that storm still making its way off the Pacific Northwest, but then again, that's kind of usual this time of the year. And naturally, a little bit of snow, courtesy of some orthographic lift, also happening across parts of the Rocky Mountains. Where's our cold air? Let's take a look at these temperatures. It's in the 50s in Iowa. It's in the 40s across most of Minnesota. And even if we go back into Wyoming, they're sitting in the 50s, almost nearing 60 degrees, I believe. Yeah, to 58 there. And even look at that, 61 degrees there in parts of Nebraska, 62. So over around Scottsbluff, it's even pretty warm. So, where is our cold air this time around? Well, as has been most of the case this winter, it has been locked away in Canada, not by a few miles, by more than a couple hundred miles. In fact, 1,000 miles, if not sometimes even a little bit more than that. Let's take a look. Here it is, way up here. And even then, it's not necessarily the most impressive cold air mass, but then again, we are getting into the end of February, so, kind of makes a bit more sense. But relatively speaking, there it is. All right. Is it going to be coming our way? Yes, but in kind of a really weird fashion. It's going to take its time. You see, what's actually going to be happening here is we're going to be watching as kind of another system is going to develop out across parts of Oklahoma, and then it'll eventually track its way. And it will meet up, but this colder air probably won't arrive until another day or so later, and then it might stick around for a couple of days. Now, is this going to be like what we saw back in January? Probably not, but certainly enough to maybe push us a little bit closer to average across parts of the upper Midwest. Unfortunately, probably not going to stick around at least too long. So let's take a look here at one of our short range forecast models here. And basically, let's take a look at this bad boy. So here we go right now, kind of a little bit of a zonal flow across the upper part of the Midwest. And then we're going to see that kind of transition to this little quick ridge that's going to move through during the day tomorrow. But it's this trough coming off the Pacific coast that'll be a little bit more helpful, but it's not going to be that strong. In fact, we call this a shortwave trough, as a matter of fact, and it's this part right here. Very hard to see, but you kind of pick it up with the vorticity markings on here. So that's going to help to kind of spawn that area of low pressure. And eventually that will be good news a little bit as we will start to see that kind of another upper level trough developing across parts of Hudson Bay. And then it will kind of meet up a little bit as it goes into New England and maybe kind of helping to bring somewhat winter weather over towards that region. But then again, you can see right behind it, looks like we're going to start seeing maybe a little bit more ridging, and that could set us up for yet another system as we head towards the middle part of next week. But again, that's going a little far out. We won't go into details about that tonight. But let's take a look at what that looks like here. If we talk about precipitation, there you go. There comes our shortwave trough moving out of the Rocky Mountains as we head into what tomorrow night, going into the day on Thursday. You can see it developing right there, and then tracks its way quickly, kind of helps to produce a good amount of precipitation across the Ohio River Valley area. This is likely mainly going to be rain. In fact, it'll probably almost entirely be rain. In fact, I don't really know. There might be some snow across the mountains way up in New York, but that's about it. So what could be interesting also to keep an eye on this too is there might be the possibility for some thunderstorm development with that. That could be kind of interesting. Still a little too early for, Ohio River Valley and Mississippi Valley severe weather season. But then again, theirs doesn't really have a definitive start or end, but typically wouldn't be towards maybe March that we'd start seeing that. But it'd be kind of interesting to see exactly, what this like I said, there'll be some thunderstorms. And we'll just have to kind of see how things go out. I'm not gonna go into specifics about that tonight. All right. Maybe a couple of them could be strong. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Not, just a couple of them maybe. So it's something at least. All right. The way this month has been going, it has been so quiet. We'll take what we get. All right, let's take a look here. As we move our way forward, what's going to happen going towards the weekend? You can see that low really kind of begins to, intensify a bit more as it heads towards the East Coast there. And then that's that's about it for the most part. Now, some of that colder air will be trying to arrive. Again, it's a little hard to see, but right here is going to be the arrival of that Canadian air mass. A little trippy to see right here, but there it kind of is. So as we go into the weekend, that colder air mass will kind of move in. We'll see maybe a day or so of winter-ish weather, and then we're going to see that ridging coming right back and warming things up across the upper part of the Midwest. So a little bit of excitement, but again, we'll take what we can get. So, yeah, that is kind of how things are shaping up. This has been a very uneventful winter. Well, I guess I shouldn't say that. It's had its moments. The Deep South stuff, that was pretty cool. And we did have winter, so I guess I shouldn't say it's been uneventful, but compared to the past two winters, at least up around this area, certainly very weird. So like I said, we've been stuck at perpetual November, pretty much. In fact, if you want to know some numbers, are over around the Duluth area. Let's see here, about 17.7 inches of snow. 17.7 inches of snow. That's it. Normal is about 90. A little bit below average, to say the least. International Falls, only about 25.7 inches of snow so far for the season. Again, that's also a little bit below average. But at least a little bit more. And again, if you're watching this from anywhere south of I-70, this is a lot of snowfall for you. But for everybody who lives up around the Northlands and going into parts of Canada, this is pretty below average. So the month of October, actually, in Duluth area was not actually that unusual. It was like a degree above average, but all things considered, that it's kind of be expected. Plus or minus a degree or so here and there. Uh, November came around. It was a little bit above average too. Average high was about 40 degrees. The average low was about 23. And then we got into December, and the average high was 36, and the average low was actually a degree above. Was actually a degree warmer than November's, and that was about 25 degrees. So again, perpetual November. Then we got into January, which was a little bit more like December, with an average high of about 23.1 and the average low about 11.1 degrees, and picked up about 9.3 inches of snow. So again, a little bit more like what we'd expect in December. Then February comes around, and we're like, okay, well maybe we'll see, January weather in February. No, we didn't. It looks like we just kind of skipped that and gone straight to March. So about 35 degrees so far, and about 21 degrees for the low, and we've only picked up about 6/10 of an inch of snow so far this month. So yeah, not the best. Where I am in northern Wisconsin, aren't faring much better. We really haven't had any lake effect snow. Now we've actually probably had a little bit more snow than Duluth, just because we've had like a little quick lake effect event, but that's really about it. All right, so that in mind, warm, probably going to continue. What can I tell you? All right, so we'll talk more about everything coming in tomorrow night. We'll talk about, we'll see if we got some storms ongoing, and we'll see what that does. We'll see if maybe we have the possibility for some snow. That's about it. Anyways, I hope you all have a good rest of your evening. We'll see you back here tomorrow evening. Until that time, and keep enjoying that weather.